Hi, I'm Laurie Pascoe, a family law lawyer practicing in Ottawa, Ontario since 1977. I have produced a series of exciting action-packed videos on how to complete Ontario's financial statements. So to help my clients and anyone else in Ontario who is separating from their spouse or varying their separation agreement or varying a court order, so they can better understand and complete the financial statement. I have broken down my presentation into a series of videos. The first video is a general introduction to the financial statement, and the rest are mostly divided along the lines of the many different parts of the financial statement. To help explain how to complete the financial statement, I have created a fictitious client and a fictitious financial statement rather than having a blank statement. And where appropriate, and to understand the form better, I will at times discuss the law a little. Remember, these videos are not to be used as a replacement for legal advice. You should still consult a lawyer. This video discusses Part 2 expenses and the proposed budget, which is found in the financial statement before Schedule A, and Schedule B, which deals with extraordinary or special expenses for the children. And Part 3, other income earners in the home. Part 2, expenses. Please put the amount you spend on the expense in the appropriate category on a monthly basis. Therefore, if it's a yearly expense, divide by 12. These expenses may be estimates for the next 12 months. In the housing expense line, state whether it's a rent or mortgage. If there are expenses not listed, then add them in the blank space provided in each subheading. I have found, however, there are not too many types of expenses that have not been thought of by the drafters of this form. A lot of people, however, put in their legal expenses under other expenses. Hopefully, this is a low one-time expense, but it may be necessary to input it to show where your money has been going. If you borrow to pay certain expenses, then those expenses should be accounted for only once. For example, if you buy all your clothes on a department store credit card and make the payment on that card, the monthly payment should not be put under the loan payment, but only under clothing. To put it in both clothing and credit cards would be double accounting. However, if you are paying a loan or credit card amount for past expenses that are not being paid for now, put the full monthly loan payment amount or in the monthly credit card payment you are paying in that line where it says debt payments. If an expense is yours but presently being paid by your spouse, please note that on the form. If you are sharing housing expenses with a new partner or roommate, then put down your share of that expense, but advise me or your lawyer what percentage you are paying. If you have a business, do not double account by having business expenses that your business pays for inserted in the financial statement. Those expenses should be reflected in the net income of your business. Please note what personal expenses, for example automobile expenses, are being paid by your business. With the introduction of the child support guidelines and the spousal support guidelines, one's expenses are not nearly as important as they once were in determining support issues. And in fact, in some negotiations, very simple cases, some lawyers will agree to not require a party to insert their expenses on their financial statement. However, I think it is still important to fill out the expense section and to treat it seriously, as it may be relevant for support considerations. It is also a good exercise in doing the life skill of budgeting, which will be more important now that you are separated and money is generally more limited. If the total of your expenses are less than the total of your income, you are saving money. Please explain where the savings have accumulated. Has your savings account gone up? Did you have a major purchase? It's good to figure out why income expenses do not balance, because if they don't, without a good explanation, then your figures are wrong. The common case, of course, I find, is that the stated expenses are much greater than the stated income. In that case, one or a combination of things may be happening. You may be borrowing money. You may be receiving help from a friend or relative. You may not be paying some expenses now, as some yearly expenses have not come due. There may be legal expenses not in the form, or more than likely, you simply don't spend that much money on an expense that you say you do. If you want to spend that amount of money on those expenses, then you'd complete the proposed budget found later in the form, which I'll now discuss. This part of the financial statement, being the proposed budget, is rarely used or even filled out. However, it is still a good exercise in budgeting and could be used to justify a higher amount of spousal support based upon need. So if there are some expenses that you are not spending as much as you like to, put on this form how much you'd like to spend. Not in the financial statement, but in divorce mates' forms is a children's budget, which may also be filled out in the appropriate case, especially where there is shared custody, or where children are attending university. If it's necessary to fill out this form, I or your lawyer will give it to you. Schedule B separates out special or extraordinary expenses of the children because they are treated separately for child support purposes. These types of expenses are already recorded in Part 2 of the financial statement in the various expense categories, but are singled out in this schedule because in addition to the amount of child support payable determined by the child support guideline tables, additional child support is generally also paid to either parent for what are commonly referred to as Section 7 expenses. These are special or extraordinary expenses. Once an expense is determined to fall into this category, they are shared in proportion to the gross incomes of both parties. However, in determining gross income, the amount of spousal support paid and received is taken into account. So if one party earns $100,000 and pays $20,000 to their spouse who earns $30,000, the portion of the higher income spouse pays is calculated as 80 over 120, which is equal to 66%. And not 100 over 120, which would be 83%. Now, for some high expenses, such as university expenses, many parties agree to a more fair proportion by looking at the net disposable income, which takes into account taxes and child support. But that's another story. Some Section 7 expenses are obvious, such as child care, medical insurance and medical expenses, and post-secondary expenses. But other expenses for extracurricular activities may or may not be classified as Section 7 expenses, depending on a number of factors. Whether or not they fall into this category is unfortunately at the discretion of a judge and is not always uniformly applied. Your lawyer or I will discuss this issue with you. But at this time, it's best to put down all those expenses and we will sort out which ones will qualify. Part 3, Other Income Earners in the Home. Technically, as it states on the form, this section is only necessary to be filled out where there is either a claim for spousal support by either party or there is a claim of undue hardship. Where undue hardship is found, the amount of child support can be different than the amount calculated by the child support guidelines. The reason the other income earner's income is asked for is it may be relevant for the spousal support and undue hardship issues, period. It is definitely relevant for the undue hardship claims, but generally not for spousal support claims. Undue hardship is specifically defined in the child support guidelines. First, it contains a standard of living test that compares the standard of living based upon the total incomes of the two households and the number of people in the household. It is a very difficult arithmetic test to pass and is very rarely used, so I'll not start explaining it in this video. The information in this part could technically, though not generally, be relevant for the extraordinary expense issue. So please complete this section, as it also provides a better understanding of the big picture. I or your lawyer will decide whether it's relevant to include in the final financial statement. Other income earners include a married or common-law spouse. It does not include a roommate or a tenant. This information could also be used to ensure the other income earner is paying their fair share of expenses. For some unexplained and illogical reason, Part 3 of this Form 13.1 is not at Part 3 in Form 13. In that form, this part is called Schedule B. Both Part 3 of Form 13.1 and Schedule B of Form 13 ask for identical information in the same format, but just in different places. This inconsistency between forms will definitely be changed in my next time when I'm a drafter of the family law forms. And remember, these videos are not to be used as a replacement for legal advice. You should still consult a lawyer.